This is In the Middle with Josh and Sarah Siders. We get it. You're probably going through something that's asking you to dig deep, think differently, and hold on against the odds.
So these are our thoughts about starting new things, shutting some things down, and being with you, right there in the middle.
Welcome back to the In the Middle podcast, the podcast for those of us who have not arrived yet. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Josh. It's really great to be with you. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Welcome to episode 10.
10
We are in
episodes.
double digits.
Yeah.
Almost off of
All our
two
fingers.
hands. Yeah, right. So we're excited to be here with you. And we have a sponsor today.
Yep.
Our sponsor today brought to you by coffee.
Coffee. Not just any coffee. I mean, let's be honest. It's not Robusto beans. It's Arabica beans.
Yeah, it's not Folgers.
It's not Folgers or Maxwell House. I mean, not to be crappy. We're saying who our sponsors aren't.
Yes.
But there's a certain quality of bean.
Yeah. Life
You
is
know?
too short.
Life's too short.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's
And
good
we're going to have
coffee.
to, yeah. When it's like your fuel. So you can get coffee at your local, hopefully locally owned coffee shop.
Locally roasted, yeah.
Small batch brewed. That's what we would recommend.
Yeah,
And you can
yeah.
get it in black, latte, or latte adjacent, sugary nonsense, or pumpkin.
Pumpkin.
Seasonally available.
Gingerbread, too.
Or gingerbread.
Gingerbread. So how many
Yeah.
what's this cup
This
for you
is
today?
two. This
Okay,
is two.
this is 3. Cheers.
Yeah, it's late
Cheers,
morning.
Steve.
Cheers.
There you go.
Cheers to episode 10. Cheers
That's
to coffee keeping us
Functioning.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, okay, so this brings us to today's topic.
Okay.
Because today's topic is capacity.
Yeah.
And capacity is very, it's a very intangible concept, but
Yeah.
it is absolutely tangible when it comes to how you're living your life
Correct.
and how you feel in terms of like how you feel in your body and what you feel like you can accomplish
Right.
on a
Absolutely.
day-to-day basis. And so I'd be curious, like, I mean, I guess I can give a little bit of a backstory.
Yeah.
So I'll just say that recently I've been, it as the we've gotten into the daylight savings, less sunlight, and I have noticed this year more than any other year that I've been struggling with energy. And my normal routine of like getting up in the morning and going for a walk outside got disrupted. And so I had to like come up with a new way to do that. And I've been talking about that last week episode. I said the treadmill's saving my butt.
Yeah.
And so, I was like, I was just, I'm trying to think about that. But I've realized that for me, there's different like categories of capacity where in some areas I feel like I'm doing really well or really strong. In others where I feel like I have less capacity or less room. And I feel like, especially with my body right now, I've noticed that when my body doesn't feel strong, when I don't have as much energy, that it affects everything. It affects my sense of ability to do things and to like my sense of hopefulness. I feel really vulnerable to low capacity right now, where maybe like if it's summer or there's other things or a certain like environmental energy, I can maybe ride off that. But right now I'm having trouble with like, I don't have an environmental energy. And so I have to have these other elements of capacity. So I just got me thinking about it. What makes up our capacity? Like, what are the elements of, that are on like a sliding scale of capacity, and what are the categories where we go, oh, I have a lot of room for that. I have a lot of margin right now. Or I'm really low margin in that area. So I don't know, like, any thoughts. You had some great like pre-show thoughts on this, but just like your initial thoughts on like defining capacity or like how you see it, what categories.
Yeah. Capacity. I don't have any research-based or back evidence of this, but when I think of capacity, I think of just what you're capable of in the moment.
Yeah, capable.
What you're capable of in any given moment.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of factors that determine that. Overall holistic wellness.
Yeah.
I think, like when we think about capacity, it's usually related to resilience,
Mhm.
which is the
Yeah.
capability to like bounce back to your former shape.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that has to do with some of the capacity is just like what you're able to handle, I guess. And there is there can be some acute challenges, and then that lower our capacity, and then I think some chronic
Yeah.
challenges that lower our capacity. So
Okay.
just long term, ongoing things.
Huh.
I
Okay.
think.
No, that's a good category. I
Yeah.
didn't think about that. Time
What would you say?
durations.
Like
I was just
what is
thinking about
capacity?
categories. Like,
Mhm.
I was thinking about, physical health
Yeah.
and how that, for me is super underrated when it comes to mental health. Like, I'm going to do some kind of reel or video on this because this feels huge. Like, people think about mental health as mindset, self talk, relationships. And I've always thought that. And as a therapist, that's what we focus on. We so rarely are like talking to someone about it. Maybe we're talking about sleep. We're rarely talking about nutrition in a mental health session,
Right.
just a standard session. But it's like how you feel in your body has so much to do with how you feel generally.
Yeah.
So I think physical health, mental health, and sense of like capability. So capacity and capability, somewhere in there, there's like a root prefix there. And it probably has something to do with like holding, like the ability to hold something. Capability,
let me Google it. You keep
capacity.
going. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about that because you said capability, and I was like, oh, I was thinking of ability, capacity, and ability, and you put them together, and that's a word. Capability is a word. The ability within your capacity, like, oh, it's so interesting to me. I love language, but yeah, I think that mental health has a lot to do. What
You nailed it.
I did.
Don't lose your thought.
Oh,
you gonna lose your thought?
Okay. Thanks.
Middle English, capacite from Old French, from Latin.
Ooh, so
capax, able to hold much.
Yeah, holding. Yeah.
To hold, it, contain, to take. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, you can tell, like, I mean, but to be fair, like, it could have evolved, but it hasn't evolved. Like, over 2,000 years or however long, 3,000 years, it hasn't evolved. I think that's, like, really cool because it's neat to see, like, words hold their, retain their meaning over time. But, I think that is, like, again, coming back to categories, physical health, mental health, and how they go together. Because if you know me at all, you heard me always say heads attached to your body. So you're never gonna have like your mental health without your physical health.
Yeah.
You are. It's all like my business is called Whole You because you are just a whole person.
Yeah.
And everything affects everything.
I think that's really good.
And yeah.
When I would, over the years, if I've met with like department leaders, things like that, I used to do a check called RPMs. And I would ask them how they're doing, rate themselves 1 to 10, 10 being high on relationships, physical health, mental health, and spiritual health.
Oh yeah, I remember doing this too.
So
that's good.
It's kind of like you want, and some of it is you want to know which way that is swinging too, not just where you're at in the moment, but like over the last couple of days, couple of weeks, how have you been doing in these areas?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a 6, but headed to a 7. I'm a 5 headed to a 4. Okay. And so those would be relationships, physical health, mental health, spiritual health. Just some really quick touch points and check-ins. Maybe that has to do also with what we were getting at with like, how's your capacity at this moment? Not just for production or effectiveness, but like I care about you as a person.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Yeah.
And how are you handling the stress of life in these different areas? And how are you maintaining your health over these areas? And overall, I'm kind of connecting the dots as I speak, as you talk.
Yeah.
Is those things all have to do with our capacity to handle life.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And that's kind of like another way of like the categories, I kind of landed on physical health, mental health. Those feel big, but that's not the only categories. I mean, the quality of our relationships, again, these things all flow together.
Right.
So like my mental health is not going to be good if my relationships are in shambles. there's gonna be a feedback loop there. My
Right.
relationship to myself,
They're
God, and
integrated.
others.
Yeah.
Yes, they're all like they're yeah, woven together for sure. But then I think there's other things. When I think about like right now, I'm looking at starting a coaching program for next year, like kind of coming into 2025 and helping people focus on like one key area. And the thing people focus on relationships, health, and finances, and ultimately like maybe their career is like a subcategory of that, but career tends to be something more like business. Um, but those are the areas that we need capacity in.
Yeah.
We need financial capacity because it's power.
Yeah.
It's like the ability to make decisions or
Right.
have freedom. Relationships are like the network within which
Yeah.
we operate, and we really can't do anything without them. Whether it's just like I don't want to live with anyone, and I don't want to have kids, and I don't want to be in a relationship, but I'm gonna have a business. Like, well, you have clients, you have employees. Like, you can't ever do anything on your own.
Right.
And so relationships are huge. And then health, like overall health. How are you doing? It's so interesting. I'm thinking about this health concept and the very cliche thing that people would say, like just this thing that people would say, like at the holidays, like in a dismissive way. Well, at least you have your health. Well, at least you have your health. And I'm like, dude, like the older you get, that feels like it's not, if you're dealing with big stuff, if you're dealing with grief and loss, and if you're dealing with, major change, you that's really, really hard, and it
Yeah.
affects your physical health,
Yeah.
those things. But when someone says, well, at least you have your health, you're like, yeah, like
Yeah.
that's the last, it's like that's your body. Anyway,
Maybe you don't take it for granted as much
You-
as you did earlier in life, where some people, if you say
Yes.
when you're 25, well, at least you have your health. You're like, of course I have my health.
of
I'm
course
always
I
gonna
have my
health.
health.
But in
yeah.
when you hit 40 and beyond, a lot of time, maybe earlier, you're like,
Oh.
yeah, I'm so glad.
Oh.
Yeah.
You realize that you have to work for it.
Yeah.
So I think like so you talked about chronic and acute influences on capacity. And I think there's also internal and external. So you talked about stress and eustress.
Yeah.
So definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah.
I think like really there's this sense of how much of capacity is me and what I like inherent or within my own control, how much is outside of my control. And the like high responsibility Enneagram 8 wants to be like, my capacity is 100% within my control. And it's like, yes, it is within the starting point. So I have a capacity of like, there's that story that Jesus talks about where there's talents or resources that people are given.
Yeah.
One story is 10, 5, and 1, I think, and one story is 5, 2, and 1. But either way, there's like people are given certain amounts of things. And I think about that, like it sort of implies like money or with influence. But I think it's anything where there's a resource, therefore there's a capacity. Some of us are given a 1, a 2, or a 5, and that can be your family of origin, education, or the stability of your family. It can be your genetic makeup, and how hard you have to work to be healthy, versus not. Things like that. So I think we are all starting with something. So like everyone's starting with a 5, 2, or 1 in terms of resources, emotional capacity, or emotional intelligence potentially. But then what are you going to do with that, right? Can you make 5 more, 2 more, 1 more out of what you had? Can you double it? Can you invest it? So I think I'm 100% responsible for what I do with my 2.
Yeah.
I may only have gotten 2,
but
I'm responsible for what I do with that. It's like, whoa, okay. So that's that's how I would interpret it. I'd be curious about how you would think about like, responsibility for capacity, like internally.
I think that's a good way to think about it, actually. I hadn't really connected the dots, but I think, oftentimes we compare ourselves to others. C.S. Lewis said, comparison is the thief of joy, right? We put ourselves against others, and one of the points of the parable is that God's going to hold us accountable for what we do with what we've been given. He doesn't necessarily hold us accountable for like, did we 10 times it or 100 times it or whatever? what somebody else did with theirs. They got more, they got less, whatever. It's what did I do with mine? Did I go bury it?
Yep.
Did I hang on to it? Did I make something with it? And that's what ultimately God wants us to do. Is use what we give it.
Yeah.
And build His kingdom, serve other people, and discern what He's called us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree, and I think there's a lot of again categories here, right? Because I think that the um, what you've got given your starting point, and like the fact that you're not in control of that, right? You enter into the world, like if I come into the world in like a wealthy family in India, I'm still in a different place than I would be if I'm in a wealthy family in like Norway or a wealthy family in the United States or um, Argentina. Like it's just, or if I'm impoverished, but I have a family that really values education and is like, we are doing everything we can to, give you opportunities, get you to school, or someone who is impoverished and then has no mentors and role models around them, and there's a lot of war or crime or civil unrest or whatever. Like those starting points are radically different,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
That's true.
And yet you see some people really overcome
Yeah.
and do incredible things and actually be like, people always talk about Oprah as somebody, but like so many of the leaders and people in the world that we look to are people that came from those absolutely adverse conditions where you would go, wow, they were given one.
Yeah.
They started with one.
Yeah.
And they made 100. They made 1,000. They made 1,000,000. Good grief. I mean, to me, that's a capacity question that feels really radical because in that way, it's like, do you have the capacity to not just do something normal or average? Do you have the capacity to be really big? Like, and that's a character thing. So I remember when I was running for city commission, this was such a turning point. People hear me reference this because it's like, Sarah, you ran for city commission, like big deal. But it's like, it felt like a big deal because I went from being mostly anonymous to being visible.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is a hilarious analogy that is not actually like proportionate. But I remember, we all watched like the teen pop stars like completely melt down and have so much, Britney Spears shaves her head in 2007, Justin Bieber is like doing drugs and having all these issues. And I remember feeling like a lot of, compassion for them, like, oh man, they don't know who to trust. But what was interesting was when I gained a tiny bit of visibility, like micro amounts of visibility in a political space, my face is in people's yards. And I don't know those people. And even though there's only like 50,000 people in our town, and a tiny percentage of those people vote, it was like such a small amount of people that knew who I was, but it was way more than before.
Yeah.
And I felt like I didn't have the capacity for it. I felt like I was, and there was a lot of other things happening at that time.
Sure.
There were like, staff changes with our church and like just kind of feeling uncertain, feeling like expectations weren't being met, feeling like sad about certain things, and then also feeling like, do I know how to do this? Having a lot of doubt about myself in the midst of that. And I was like, oh, it gave me like just even more compassion for people whose character and foundations are maybe too small for what they, because I felt like just an enormous amount of pressure. I was numbing out so hard. I was just trying to survive that season. And here I am. I have to show up as a leader and someone who knows what I'm talking about in so many different scenarios. I felt so ill equipped. I was like terrified all the time. It was so raw. I mean, it was just like the scariest. And now, if someone was like, do you want to run? It would be like, it wouldn't even scare me. I'd be like, okay, that's a lot of work. Let me think about it.
Right.
But like at the time, it was like a lot of work and then all of this stuff internally. And so I think character, like the foundations, the depth of your soul, the root system in your soul has to has to go deep, and I think it goes deep in adversity, and it
Right.
provides like
Right.
you see those trees that like are huge, and they always have a huge root system, and I think like that season, I thought, oh, I'm reaching up, I'm expanding my influence, like I've been, looking for this, I've been thinking about how to have more influence. And I think that was probably still ego because my root
Mm.
system, when I was given the opportunity, um, I didn't fall apart, but it was really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was actually the thing where I was like, oh, look, I'm expanding. Like,
Yeah.
look at me. And it was actually that drove the roots down deeper. It wasn't me getting, I mean,
Right.
I did get more visible
Yeah.
with working with Spark and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that was really an interesting time of like, okay, so character is a piece of
Mhm.
capacity that honestly I wasn't even prepared
Yeah.
to talk about today in the show. But I'm going, oh,
So important.
wow,
Yeah.
that's huge. Like when you think about resilience,
Yeah.
when you think about, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you are along with that. What you pointed out is like you didn't win.
No.
And you had to come back from that.
Yeah.
And it was heartbreaking. And later we found out a little relieving because the world went into a
2020.
pandemic. And so it's like, woo, okay. Thanks for sparing me
Oh my
that
God,
guy. It's like
so
you would have
real.
risen to it, but it was kind of like, okay, I kind of see.
I wouldn't have been able to get
Some
anything
perspective.
done. It would have been
Yeah,
like,
it's true.
yeah.
So I think to build our capacity, to grow in resilience,
Yeah.
something you pointed out is there's pain
Yeah.
and loss and discomfort.
Yeah. For
And
sure.
that is actually a pathway that we need
Mhm.
in our lives
Yeah.
to grow greater because it's not just taking away, it's not just about taking away what lowers our capacity. It's actually the process of gaining a bigger capacity.
Mhm.
Why would we want to be the same people year after year after year? Why not grow into the people who can handle more, grow in character, grow in capacity? And so you mentioned earlier, we talked pre-pod about stress versus eustress.
Mhm.
Stress is the normal everyday things or not normal everyday things, the acute or the chronic things that lower our capacity. There's also eustress. It's positive stress. So the EU stress.
Like euphoria.
Euphoria, yeah. So it's positive stress.
Interesting.
And so the idea is that we all need a certain amount of stress
Mhm.
for our lives. Like gravity gives us stress on our bodies, and it's,
Grounding.
it's grounding,
Yeah.
and we don't fly off the planet.
Yeah. Woo.
We can play sports like football. The ball comes back down. So there's a positive stress that we all need to walk into who we are becoming. You think of like a chick busting out of an egg.
Yeah.
What happens if you help the chick? How did it say? You take the shell for it away from it.
Yeah.
It actually dies because in that process of breaking out of the egg, it's developing muscular resistance. So it can stand up. Yeah, totally.
Oh yeah.
And so we need that too in our lives. The trick is to not overdo it on stress. We need just the right amount.
Mhm.
How much that is at any given time is kind of a mystery. I'm sure there's been some research or some things written about it. But the point is we need a certain amount of stress. And it actually helps us grow. We withstand the challenge. Otherwise, we'd just be blobs on the couch. Not standing up to anything in our lives, definitely not achieving things that are challenging.
Yeah.
And I think that's the danger about the therapeutic age that we live in, where everything's kind of pathologically like traumatic or something.
Yeah,
like that.
that's hard.
No offense to the therapist in the room, but you understand what I'm talking about.
No, I think the same thing.
Is that we are, I think, passing on this mindset of like, I can't handle life. And I'm thankful for good therapy.
Yeah.
Good
Both had good therapists.
process of talking out, healing the brain, the mind, and yet by reinforcing this idea of like, oh yeah, life is too hard, you're not fit to handle it, things like that. We don't challenge ourselves in the right ways to stick it out, to overcome, and to push through. And then it's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy of, you don't have what it takes.
Yeah.
And we have people that just kind of give up on stuff or just phone it in, And so we do need some kind of stress to, and we need to avoid other kinds of stressors in order to grow, to be capable of handling things and doing greater things.
Yeah, like when you go to the gym
Yes.
and you're kind of breaking down your muscles, and it's like, wait, that's decreasing your capacity, but it's like in order to increase your capacity, your ability. So I think so there's capacity growth through kind of like deconstruction or like taking something apart through reflection, through hardship. That grows your capacity once you're like, oh, look at me, I can survive it. We can do hard things, whatever. There's also like, I think the capacity of discipline or curation. Like, okay, I know that water is good for me. Dr. Pepper is not. So I need more water, less Dr. Pepper.
That's right.
I need more protein. I need less Pringles, which I don't really, that's not really a big, temptation for me, but like a carb or something where my body, like if I
processed
foods. Yeah. So just like paying attention. I mean, we have science, but also science doesn't apply to everyone in the same way. So what I need, you can do a different diet than me. Like you can go more like hardcore keto, less carbs. And I'm like, I really can't do that much, but it requires me to be even more intentional.
And I think your point in saying this is that by being disciplined about what we consume, or whether it's food and nutrition or even media, environmental things that we put ourselves in, we actually can be more stronger and more resilient. We can be more centered, less brain fog, less stress that we're taking in. Because I quoted it a couple weeks ago. Arthur Brooks talked about some of that. Is that what tends to increase our happiness is like the challenge of learning something tough. But what we usually reach for is the low hanging, easy, scrollable.
Yes.
That applies to so many things in life. I mean, who hasn't after a stressful day grabbed your phone? It's 12:30 at night on your couch or in your bed, scrolling Instagram mindlessly. It's that dopamine hit to like self-comfort. What we really probably needed to do was, dial back, maybe have a hot shower or hot bath, go to bed a little earlier, get a little bit more sleep. But we wanted the quick fix, the quick reward. We do that with food too. We're stressed, so we reach for the Pringles, we reach for the pizza with all the toppings. And get the quick hits of dopamine rather than to cook myself a steak, make a salad, drink some extra water, things like that. And what we're doing is it's harder to do those things because it's easier to get the quick fix. It actually decreases our capacity because we feel groggy the next day, lack of sleep, too much alcohol, too much processed foods, too much whatever. And, the thing that we think is helping in the moment is actually dragging our overall capacity down.
It's so true. Oh my gosh. Like the decision to think long term. I mean, that's a midlife thing, right? Like shifting from short term to long term. And so when you go, okay, I'm going to do the meal plan. I shifted over this fall, working with, collaborating with my friend who's a nutritionist, Felicia with Vitality Nutrition, shout out. And, she was like, hey, you need protein in the morning. And I'm seeing all this stuff on all the, perimenopause influencers, but I hadn't really made that shift. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can tell I'm hungry. This isn't working for me. And so you've seen me make that shift to doing breakfast every morning, just protein, greens, vitamins, and just kind of putting all that together. And that is the long-term decision, the thinking, as opposed to even when I started out with it, I was doing a protein infused granola and yogurt, and it was high protein but also high sugar. So it was okay, that was my first step, but then I was this is still not as good because of that post-inflammatory effect of sugar, and then you get that energy, things. So I think there's something like there, I don't know, some people are more disciplined, but a lot of people who, especially people like me who have ADHD, or people who are like really busy, or they're just kind of tuning into their bodies, or whatever it is, they're like looking for the short term
Right.
at first,
Right.
the easiest thing. And the more pain there is around something, so maybe you're a high disciplined person, good for you. This isn't for you. This is for people who are like medium to low discipline, who struggle with habits, who struggle with the long term. It's like you get to a pain point where you're like, okay, I know this is the only thing that works, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to freaking do it. Like when I was having my huge mental health crisis, like in 2014, I always struggled with once I was a mom and married, like having time in the morning to be quiet or to prioritize my relationship with God. And maybe I was reading my Bible or praying or doing some kind of like a ritual in the mornings, and I struggled with that. Getting up early and getting out to work. It was hard. There was so much going on. It was very demanding, but like I was at the point where my soul, my mind was in hell.
Yeah.
It was horrible. And I would sit on that chair and I would sit there for like 7 minutes, and I wasn't even doing anything except for like being aware that I was
Just some solitude time.
Yeah. And it was like time for me, and everything else in the day was, my kids, the nonprofit, the job, I'm in mental health, the church. It was so demanding. And so having that time, like it literally screwed my head back on my body.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely mandatory for a really long time. And now I have some more flexibility with it. But like sometimes those pain points will make you go, oh, I'm willing to do this uncomfortable thing, this longer term thing, because I can tell, wow,
that's good. Well, so what I'm hearing from you is in order to remove negative stress and increase capacity. Yeah. Right. There's some practices that you've done. Yeah. And that you return to year after year. There's some spiritual practices. Yeah. Solitude. So prayer.
Yes, practices. That's good.
There is, you haven't said this, but I know this about you. Sleep is a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Certain amount of sleep.
Yep.
There's things that you read or watch, and certain other things you don't read or watch.
So
right?
True.
Like it's got to be certain. There's a certain stimulation that you need.
Yeah.
And then there's a nutrition. Along with water.
Yeah.
Protein in the morning. Yeah. Being aware of other things that you consume, and just trying to really focus on whole foods, things like that.
Yeah.
Would you add anything else to those that are watching or listening? Even more from a female perspective, because I can have my own here in a minute. Mm-hmm. What else? What other practices or what other things that would help lower the stress on your body, your soul, and then help to increase your capacity?
So good. Yeah, I think that you're caring for your body with a lot of those disciplines. Those were so good. One thing was like admitting that I had ADHD and like being willing to go, okay, my brain does this, instead of just being like, oh, these are moral failures or like just weird quirks that irritate people. It was like, I needed to just be like, this is the kind of brain that I have. And so how can I really shore up the tools and the rails of my life, the habits of my life, the things that work. And so kind of just like, admitting reality has been helpful, I think, for all of us in the family. I think that journaling has been, for me, I do this in a session with coaching or therapy clients. I write down what I'm hearing because I need the kinesthetic act, I need the visual act. I'm a kinesthetic and visual person. And so for me, like taking what's in my brain, which feels like a tornado, putting it down in front of me, processing it that way, I get insight from that. It's a way that I pray. It's a way I process. And I literally thought that like for years, tiny aside, I thought for years like I wasn't a like very holy or spiritual person because I wasn't sitting in my room with my eyes closed praying. Like that was not going to happen. I was not going to be able to really do that. But I can write. Yeah. I could go for a walk and I could pray. And like so I could do action oriented.
Yeah.
Which is like, of course that's how I am. Of course. But I felt so bad for like decades that I wasn't very spiritual. You're better. You can sit there and focus. I was like, I can't do that. I can't. but when my body's moving, when I'm moving, when I can see it, that makes a difference. So journaling for me has been a huge, like discipline that increases my awareness. My definitely increases my capacity to focus, to prioritize. So that one is huge. And I think it increases the room that I have, but it also lowers the water line. So it like lowers the stress level.
Yeah.
I think there's, I probably have some other ones that I could think of, but those were just kind of some ones off the top of my head. And if I think of something while you're talking, share it. But
definitely.
What would you say are like some of your practices?
Yeah. So, I have for years. I've drunk about a gallon of water a day.
Yeah.
I have an Nalgene that I just kind of know the capacity there. I drink a few of those throughout the day. So that's something that has been helpful. 7 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Just really holding to that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of more of a nighttime guy.
Yeah.
So I really have to kind of put myself to bed.
Yep.
And go, okay, here I'm waking up in just over 7 hours, time to go to sleep. I think for me, movement is really important.
Yeah.
I just recently finished the book Good Energy by Casey Means. Really good book, and kind of puts together a lot of things over the years that I felt like, okay, that really helps me out. The book gets kind of weird existentially towards the kind of middle end, so can't sign off on that.
Perhaps a worldview that you wouldn't
totally. But overall, talking about metabolic health and some of the things that the standard American diet has us put into our bodies, really, really bad stuff. So overall, for me, in agreement with that book, avoiding refined carbohydrates, sugars, avoiding processed foods, preferring more whole foods, especially protein, high amounts of protein, and then avoiding bad oils. Preferring olive oil or butter or tallow, things like that. That really helps. So water, sleep, movement would be in there. Nutrition, movement as far as like I love going to the gym. But getting steps in, getting between, she recommends 7,000 up to 10,000 steps a day. That's been really good. Been doing that for a couple weeks now, and just have really felt energy levels starting to rise. And it doesn't have to be this big, like I go run a 5K, 10K every day, but 30 minutes here on the treadmill, take a walk down the block, take a walk around the park, go to the gym, run on the treadmill. Chuck it out throughout the day has really, really helped. I'd say for me that those things really help. And then watching screen time, really being on top of social media consumption, news consumption, even reading books. That's not a big challenge to me, but like being reaffirmed that reading long form articles or books and wrestling with the argument over hundreds of pages is actually a really good mental exercise. And so that's been really good and affirming as far as kind of how I'm wired and what gives me energy in life throughout the day.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. And those are like so personal. And I think that probably a lot of people could go, oh yeah, I need to be doing that, or I should be doing that. I think like I just want to make a note about the difference, because it's like, as we head into this middle portion of our life, when we are doing things that decrease our capacity or that fill up, like let's say that we're not maybe doing things that increase our capacity, or life is like relatively stable, then your capacity isn't increasing per se. But you might be doing things that are just like bad habits that like keep your inflammation high, that keep you numbed out, keep you stressed. And so your water line, like reactivity is a way to know that your water line is high. That you're
Absolutely.
And I mean, that's something that for me,
how quickly do I snap?
Or do I just like react, like I get
numb out or
mad, numbing out, being reactive, like kind of the dorsal vagal, like this kind of shutting down, getting into a trance numbing out states, or like being reactive, fight or flight. That is the, like for me, and I talk to so many women when we're anxious, we're irritable.
Yes.
And so we'll fire off at stuff. And
Yeah.
a lot of times it's like our nervous system, our feeling of
Mhm.
like anxiety is just really high.
Mm.
And it's a body thing,
Yeah.
right?
And it's anger, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes anger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So women, it's like snap, like
Mhm.
irritability. Men, it's like get big, kind of Hulk.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, women do this too.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think like learning how, like for me, a lot of it is like I'm tired. And so I
Yeah.
get overwhelmed easily. I feel inflamed or I have something so I can't focus as well.
Right.
So you're saying something to me and something else is happening and I can't handle it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
You know?
And to that point, let me just say, learning to be kind to yourself in
Yeah.
the process on the journey.
Yeah.
That this isn't an overnight thing. Like, yeah, you can decide. Like, a lot of this isn't new information. It's
No.
for us. It's I just need to do the thing.
Yep.
I need to do those things that I know that maybe discover some new habits or
Yep.
some hobbies that I enjoy that get me further down that goal. But what I would say along with that is be kind to yourself because, and this is a little tinfoil hat, but I think it's backed by just research and awareness. So much of our culture that is trying to steal your time and attention
Yeah.
is addictive on purpose.
Yep. Oh.
So if you think of social media, there are, MIT and Stanford graduates that sit in rooms, much smarter than all of us, sit in rooms and figure out ways to make social media bingeable to keep you addicted to it and continue scrolling. That's a known fact. Connected to that is all the way up to the FDA. There are companies that make food addictive.
Yeah.
That hit the right spots, that trigger dopamine to keep you consuming it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is an uphill battle
Yes,
of
it is.
becoming not just aware, but actually doing the things. It's hard to do it because the game is rigged against us doing it.
Yep.
So we keep satiated and buying these products. And so you have to be kind to yourself when you fall off the wagon and binge because the system's rigged.
Yep.
And so just keep going. If you had a bad day, bad weekend, just restart. Get back on the horse, whatever metaphor you want to use.
Yeah.
And keep going. Get some friends in your life, get some accountability, get some people that have your back when it's hard. And, after you binge whatever food's in your cabinet, throw it back out on Monday and start again. Go back to the gym, go for a walk. You binge a couple extra hours of Instagram Reels or Netflix or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, delete it off your phone on Monday. Let's go again. You have to understand, you have to be kind to yourself because it's just game. And so it's hard because it's meant to be hard on purpose.
Yeah, wow, it's so good. I was just watching a short reel about how food started becoming more soft. They started making food soft 50 years ago, and you see this huge increase in obesity in like Western countries, especially the U.S.
Huh.
And when your food is soft, you don't take as long to chew it, so you don't feel full as quickly.
Yeah.
So people are like literally soft foods, you guys.
And that is just one
foods.
aspect,
Yes.
not just even taste, texture.
So you're talking about taste. I didn't know about food softness. So
That's
I've
incredible.
been think like something for me is just like making food from scratch. Like I know that's like, oh my gosh, wow, what a luxury. But
No,
I made
society has done it for thousands of years, So
well, exactly. And it's like, look, we didn't have obesity before that. So there's like, I was up making, my shepherd's pie the other day, but it's like, I had to do it all from scratch. It took me an hour, but it's like, that's food for, a few days
Absolutely.
for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's just a lot of like, there's a lot of those things. I think another thing that's pretty important when it comes to capacity is, and that I wanted to say earlier and I forgot, is about like meaning and self-talk. Like self-talk is the sense of meaning and purpose you have. So if you're like going through something hard, if you're going through a hardship, a grief loss, an affliction, whether in any category, internal or external, that is a capacity increasing thing for you. It absolutely is. But if you are interpreting it as that you're a victim, that you can't do it, that life is coming for you and nobody else, if you're telling yourself a story that is really sad, you are like just telling yourself a non-resilient story, or the people around you are blaming you for it, or you're blaming yourself. And it is just like a, all or nothing story. Like you have to give yourself like whatever's coming into your life, may not be your fault,
Right.
but it is not there to destroy you.
Yeah.
Like, it's not. It's there to help you increase your
That's
capacity
good.
if you would rise to the challenge. Because, like, as Viktor Frankl said, like, life is asking something of us. Will we rise to that challenge? Will we step up? And so it's not always like in the Western mindset that my capacity is for me, the story of my life is for me. It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Like, the world is asking something of us. And so the things that happen in our lives are meant to help us to rise to the challenge. And a comfortable life is not a life of influence, a life of meaning. And so when we are uncomfortable, when things are really hard, like, being really disciplined about what we tell ourselves about that is huge. And surrounding ourselves with people, whether it is your pastor, priest, your rabbi, if it is your friends, if it is your coworkers, your family members, like, making sure the people who have the most influence in your life, therapists, coaches, right?
Right.
People who have influence in your life need to be people who are helping you make meaning of what's happening.
Right.
I think relationships are highly underrated part of capacity as
Absolutely.
well. So I would say, like, your body, you know, and your relationships.
Yeah.
And I know I said that maybe a little bit ago, but, like, if you're just on your own and you're doing everything right, but you don't have, like, a network of support for when things are hard, then good luck, you know, because life will come for you. Your universe, God is going to help you get more capacity. And if you don't have people to lean on, then good luck.
Yeah.
So I think, like, relationships are so important. And when I think about why I'm okay in hard times, it's like, first, I would say people.
Yeah.
It's my people that I think of. And then I'm like, oh, thank God for my body, you know, and my relationship with God. But I don't know. Anyway, there's so many angles
so many things
to, like,
That's
talk
good.
about this.
Maybe there's a part 2 in the future. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear from you all about capacity, what helps you maintain and increase your capacity, what helps you decrease the stress, and any tips, tricks, or rhythms or practices that you have in place for that.
Yeah, practices and disciplines. Those are
That's good. So what are you reading, watching, or listening to, and what is saving your butt right now?
I'm, like, behind on podcasts. Like, I keep thinking,
good
I got podcasts I gotta listen to,
Yeah.
especially end of year, going into the next year. But I just started watching, like, the 3rd season of Lupin, which is, like, French, like, kind of mini series on Netflix. They had 2 seasons that were out a few years ago, and I loved it. It's, like, high intensity, interwoven storytelling. It's like a heist, you know, it's everything that I love about, it's not a comedy, but everything I love about a story. And I get so into it, as you saw. It's so fun. I just love it. So anyway, I was watching that last night and I was like, I have to go to bed. But I was like, really, really fun. I'm so glad that it's back. There's the 3rd season. I'm reading an article about Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, and how he's, like, you know, just so disruptive, and people like don't know what box to put him in, and it's so interesting. So I'm you know, kind of making my way through that article. I think that a lot of those really disruptive South American leaders are very fascinating people. There's just, like, the approach that they have a lot of times. Sometimes they're leading well, and sometimes they're not, but I always think they're very fascinating. So anyway, so those are some reading, listening to. Saving my butt is weirdly, like, discipline, just like decisions that I'm making intentionally to, you know, every day, minute by minute, you know, work on the things that are helping my capacity, just because I don't have as much environmental capacity right now. And it's like, wow, this is interesting. So it's good. It's been a good wake up call for me on what I need to do. Other things I have to do to take care of myself. What about you? What are you?
Yes, I am watching the Chiefs have a great season.
They're having such a good season.
While they're playing not so great.
They're playing so crazy, and then they have these, like, freak things that happen, like, are there like football angels? Like, what is happening? It's like you see all those, like, cartoons, you know, those silly Disney movies in the 90s.
The football field.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It feels like that.
It feels like that doink field goal on Sunday. It's like, just how are they doing this?
What
I love it.
happening?
I love it. It's
I
so
know.
great.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm watching, and I'm watching replays of those things, and people just lose their mind over like, what deal did the Chiefs make
No.
to make
Right.
this happen?
Right. It's
So
crazy.
it's crazy. So
It's
I'm watching
so
that, and then what saved my butt? My car battery is having some issues.
Oh,
So
yeah,
my car battery charger has saved my butt.
Oh
this
my
week.
God.
Hey, we could get practical. I mean, that's super practical. So shout out to like
Oh my God.
emergency supplies, right?
Dude.
Having stuff in your garage that you need in
Yeah.
emergency situations, or
So
just
funny.
maintenance stuff. So that is saving my butt.
Yeah. We'll just get it
Yeah.
replaced.
Yeah.
It'll be your
There you go.
Christmas present.
My car. So yeah, with that. So thanks again for watching,
Yeah.
listening. Episode 10 about capacity today. So we love being with you,
Yep.
and we appreciate each and every one of you.
Yes. We'll be back with another episode next week. We'll see you then.
See you.
This is the In the Middle podcast with Josh and Sarah Siders. Visit inthemiddlecoaching.co for other resources, courses, and helpful tools.